Just a minute. Where did you go? Oh. Assalamualaikum. Oh, assalamualaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So if there's any huffaz here, we should have you recite the ayah today. Yusikumullahu fi awladikum. Would you like? Fi awladikum lidhakari mithla hadhil unsayayn.
يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين فإن كن نساء فوق اثنتين فلهن ثلثا ما ترك وإن كانت واحدة فلها النصف ولأبويه لكل واحد منهما الثلث مما الثلث مما ترك إن كان له ولد فإن لم يكن له ولد وورثه أبواه فلأمه الثلث فإن كان له إخوة فلأمه السدس من بعد وصية يوصي بها أو دين آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا فريضة من الله إن الله كان عليما حكيما. MashaAllah. So the reason that I asked Sheikh Muhammad to do this ayah, it's notorious for giving huffaz fits, right? So now if I ask you, Hafiz Ali, can you recite it right now? Yusikumullahu fi awladikum. Taha, can you recite Yusikumullahu fi awladikum right now? Abdullah Nizar, can you recite Yusikumullahu fi awladikum right now? No, right now. In Ramadan, everyone can recite it. But this ayah is known for being difficult, right? Why? Because sudus, sumun, all of these numbers are mentioned, fractions are mentioned. Why? Because this ayah, it speaks about inheritance that people receive, right? And this ayah, even in the time of the Tabi'een, this ayah was known to be difficult. There was a great scholar named Imam Awza'i. Has anyone heard Imam Awza'i's name? Imam Awza'i, he was like in Lebanon area, okay? So he was from the Tabi'un or the Tabi'un. Just like we have the four famous Imams of fiqh, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad. You see, originally they were not just four Imams. There were other Imams as well. What happened is their teachings never really lived on. So over time their madhahib died. But Imam Awza'i was at their level as well. So if anybody wanted to study with Imam Awza'i, what his condition was, is that you have to recite me this ayah. If you recite me this ayah without any mistakes, it shows that you are smart and you can study with me. Otherwise, go study with someone else. Imam Abu Hanifa, he had another condition. Imam Abu Hanifa, his rule was that anybody who studies with him needs to be a hafiz. So Imam Muhammad, you see Imam Abu Hanifa, he has two main students, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. Imam Muhammad was quite young to the point that even when Imam Abu Hanifa passed away, Imam Muhammad continues his studies with Imam Abu Yusuf. So when Imam Muhammad, he came to Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, I want to study with you. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he tested him in two ways. First, he said that if I require people to be hafiz to study with me. Otherwise, you could go to the, public talks I have, but I need you to be a hafiz. He said, I'm not hafiz. 1 week later, Imam Muhammad, he came back. And he said, I want to join your khas, your students' majlis. I said, you have to be hafiz. He said, I memorized the whole Quran in the last week. He said that, okay, so Imam Abu Hanifa tested him here and there. He knew it, so he let him stay. But he did one other thing. Imam Muhammad was from a very rich family. So Imam Abu Hanifa made him go to in the course of teaching, one day he sent him to the market. And he made him buy some dirty, animal, it was intestines or something like that. And carry it back to the thing, to test his sincerity. And without any hesitation, Imam Muhammad happily did this. Imam Abu Hanifa is a very sincere and smart student. He kept him, and really the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa was pushed a lot by Imam Muhammad into the world. Coming to the ayat today, right? We're breaking this, inshallah, we're going to break it into 2 or 3 more weeks, because it's a complex topic, and it's a topic about which I would say the vast majority of questions, they come about inheritance, and they come about divorce, and in Ramadan they come about fasting, right? These are the main questions that we get. So the way that we'll discuss it, inshallah, I'm just going to read the ayah and translate it. After translating it, inshallah, we'll break down the shares. We also have to speak about the Wasuya today. right? The will. What status does a will have in Islam? And inshallah, if there's time, because I don't want it to get too lengthy, because some people when they speak about numbers, your mind begins to shut off. Some people's mind turns on, other people's minds shut off when we speak about numbers, especially about fractions. What we'll do is, inshallah, we'll cut it a little bit short. Maybe we'll talk about some of the wisdom of why a son gets more than a daughter, or a husband gets more than a wife. We'll talk about this, inshallah. If not this week, then next week. Now, speaking about numbers, shutting off a person's brain. Has anybody been playing this game called Wordle? Has anybody do you play Wordle? So there's another one now called Nerdle, right? So this Nerdle is like you have to make an equation it's like 8 slots or 9 slots. So you have to put like a number. So these kids, him and some others, they taught me about Wordle. So I was like, it's fun. So like when we sit in the academics time at the beginning of the day, we're playing Wordle every day. So I told my parents like, yeah, we already know about this. And there's another one called Nerdle as well. So I went there, it was all numbers, and I'm like, this is not for me. I'm not going to do it. But inshallah today, we'll try to make it engaging. Inshallah, your mind won't turn off. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Yuslikumullahu fi awladikum. Allah instructs you concerning your children. Already we see this word wasiya. Awsa yusi wasiyatan. So Allah gives you a wasiya. In regards to a human being, it means a bequest. In regards to Allah, it's saying that I'm giving you advice, right? Allah instructs or advises you concerning your children. لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. For the male, what is equal to the share of 2 females. Okay? So what this means is that a son will inherit double the share of a daughter. فَإِن كُنَّ نِسَاءً فَوْقَ اثْنَتَيْنِ فَلَهُنَّ ثُلُثَا مَا تَرَكَ. But if there are only daughters, meaning no sons, if there's 2 or more, for them is 2/3 of one's estate. Okay, so if a man or a woman, they pass away, and they have no sons, they just have daughters, and they have 2 or more daughters, the daughters will get 2/3 of the estate. Okay? وَإِن كَانَتْ وَاحِدَةً فَلَهَا النِّصْفُ. And if there is only one daughter, for her is half. She'll get half of her parents' estate. وَلِأَبَوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ مِمَّا تَرَكَ. And for one's parents, to each one of them is a 1/6 of his estate. إِن كَانَ لَهُ وَلَدٍ. If he left children. So if a person passes away, and they had children, each of their parents, if their parents are still alive, they will receive 1/6 of the estate. فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٍ. What if the deceased, they have parents, but they don't have children? فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. But if he had no children and the parents alone inherit from him, then for his mother is 1/3. If the mother gets 1/3, how much will the father get? 2/3. فَإِن كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ فَلِأُمِّهِ السُّدُسُ. And if he had brothers or sisters, for a mother is a 1/6. So, we'll discuss this more. مِن بَعْدِ وَصِيَّةِ يُوصِي بِهَا أَوْ دَيْنٍ. After any bequest made or debt. So this is something we have to discuss as well today. What is a bequest in Islam? What is its status? And debts. آباؤكم وأبناؤكم. Your parents or your children. لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. You know not which of them are nearest to you in benefit. فريضة من الله. In obligation from Allah. إن الله كان عليما حكيما. Verily, indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever knowing and wise. So the first thing is, we spoke about last week, we spoke generally. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He introduced the topic that women, they inherit, right? Because in that society, women and orphan children, young children who are not able to fight, they did not inherit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, last week in the ayat that we discussed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained that women, orphans, children, they inherit in all cases, right? No matter how large or small the estate is, women have women related to the deceased, they have a share in it. Along with that, the children, even if they're orphans, even if they're young, even if the mother is pregnant with them and they're unborn, they have a share in it, okay? So now what do we notice about these ayahs today? Because in these ayahs, we're going into the details, like the nitty-gritty. This person gets this much in situation A. In situation B, you get this much. In situation C. Any observations about this ayah? Other than it would be very hard to memorize? Can't be that wrong, just guess. Are all relatives mentioned or only specific relatives mentioned? So which relatives are mentioned?
The immediate
Parents, brothers, sisters.
Yes, immediate family. Specifically, parents and children. The siblings are mentioned, but their shares aren't mentioned. It's just mentioned if a sibling is present, the mother will get less, right? Parents and children. Now, why does this happen? Because what was the principle we discussed last week? In inheritance, the principle in Arabic is al-aqrabu fal-aqrab. You start with the nearest and then the nearest after that. And the nearest that a person will get in relation to anybody is their parents or their children. You came directly from the parents, and the children, they come directly from you, right? So if you were to picture like a tree and a branch and smaller twigs coming out of the tree, the root is your parents. And then you're this branch and these smaller twigs coming out, these are the children. Or you maybe instead of saying twigs, you could say fruit, right? You can't really say one is closer to the other because both are attached to you. Now your siblings may be other branches, but they didn't come from you. They came from your parents. So you're closer to your children and your parents even than you are to your siblings, right? And so this is something that's important. Now, what is the background of this ayah? The background of this ayah is hadith in Tirmidhi Sharif. It mentions this, that Sa'ad bin Rabi' radiyallahu an, he was killed in the battle of Uhud. So his wife came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said that my husband was killed with you in battle, Sa'ad bin Rabi', and he left behind 2 daughters, and these 2 daughters, they're in need. But their uncle, meaning Sa'ad bin Rabi's brother, he took all of the wealth. Why? Because they're not able to fight. He said it belongs to me. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, let's just wait. Now remember, last week I told you a different story, right? I told you about a different Sahabi and how she came and she wanted her daughters to marry their cousins, and it was a different Sahabi. And I said that these ayahs were revealed. Remember, in the Quran, many a time, several incidents that were alike or that had a common theme, they took place one after the other. And then an ayah was revealed that answered all of them. So one Sahabi will say this ayah was revealed about incident A. Another Sahabi will say this ayah was revealed about incident B. Another Sahabi will say that this ayah was revealed about incident C. If you want to go deeper, sometimes years apart incidents would take place. And an ayah would be revealed earlier regarding incident A. Then incident B takes place. And then a Sahabi would say that the ayah was revealed about incident B. Why? Because the Quran is timeless. It's the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time and space, right? So the ayah, though it came into this world or it came into our knowledge earlier, it's still applying to that incident that came afterwards, chronologically. So much so that Shah Waliullah Muhaddis Dehlawi, he writes in Al-Fawzul Kabir, Fi Usul al-Tafseer, a book about the principles of tafsir. He said, really, if we were to look at it, any incident that occurs in this world and an ayah of Quran can be applied to that incident, will say that this incident was also part of the reasons of revelation of this ayah. Okay? So there's different incidents. Anyway, so this incident, what happens, Rasulullah said, let's wait until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the judgment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed this long ayah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam called them back, and he said to Sa'ad bin Rabi's brother, I don't remember the name, he said that he had 2 daughters, they get 2/3 of the estate. He had a wife, she gets 1/8. You get the rest, right? And that's when all of these things were revealed. Okay? So now this ayah, it gives the majority of the distribution of shares, this ayah and the next ayah, and the remaining shares you're going to find in the ahadith. Now the fuqaha, what they did afterwards, they codified these rulings, giving it the status of a permanent science in Islam. And what is the science of inheritance called in Islam? Huh? Miras is just our word. But what's like in any book of fiqh, what is it called? Fara'id. Fara'id, right? Fara'is or fara'id, right? Ilm al-fara'id. And remember, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that al-fara'id nisful ilm, or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam, that the knowledge of inheritance is half of knowledge, right? Knowledge of inheritance is half of knowledge. He said, learn it or you'll forget it. And people forget it very quickly. Like I mentioned last week, there's a great scholar of the Indian subcontinent. He used to say as a student, he used to review it every day on the way to Fajr. On the way back, he'd start getting confused in it. Because there's so many contingencies. And I thought about this hadith. I was like, how is that half of knowledge? There's many answers to this. One person can say that one part of your life is in this world, one part is after you pass away. This is dealing with, after you pass away. But another thing is that really, the way that you deal with your inheritance, that's kind of a testament on the way that you lived your life, right? Because even at the end of your life, when you have nothing else to do in the dunya, if you write out a will, if you instruct others that even when I leave this world, I want things to be taken care of in accordance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, this is a testament to you, and this is a testament to your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're concerned with what happens with your belongings even after you die, that they be given in an Islamic manner, right? Another thing, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that this knowledge will leave very quickly. So I thought about this, and nowadays, even ulama, what they do, like I had a teacher, he was so strict about this, he had a passion for this. So he made us memorize this book. Like there's a book in Arabic called Siraji. He made notes of it in Urdu, and he made us memorize it in Urdu, and if we messed up a ka or a ki or something, he'd stop us on it, right? So he's like very particular. It's like, alhamdulillah, like you know it. But most people, even scholars, what they do now, there's like different apps. You go inside and you just enter this person is alive, this person is alive, this person is alive, and it'll say that the people will get this much. It's pretty accurate too. These apps, they're accurate. I'm not saying they're wrong. But what will happen if, Allah forbid, like you see geopolitical things happen all the time, right? Some catastrophe happens, right? Because, Albert Einstein, what he said is, I don't know what they'll fight World War III with. I don't know what weapons they'll use. But I know that they'll fight World War IV with sticks and stones and knives and swords, right? If something happens, Khuda na khasta, it doesn't happen in our lifetime, but if all the satellites get ruined, if technology gets ruined, where does this knowledge go? People will still live, people will still have possessions, people will still die. So it's still something, if people still have inheritance, right? So it's something important that we need to know. So the fuqaha, they codified these rulings, giving it a status of permanent science in Islam called ilm al-fara'id. I will say one more thing about fiqh, right? Sometimes people think, fiqh, this is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa. This is the opinion of Imam Malik. This is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. That, why do we follow this? We just follow the Quran and Sunnah. What they're doing is they're following the Quran and Sunnah as well, right? Now, each of you follows the laws of this country, right? And we have politicians. And we have a Supreme Court in this country, right? When a case comes in front of the Supreme Court, do they just say, okay, they read like 2 lines from the Constitution and say, this is the answer to the question? No, they don't, right? Think of the Quran, as the Declaration of Independence, giving broad laws and, guidelines for the country, right? Then think of the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the Constitution, right? Everything is derived from these two. Any person that's for abortion today or against abortion today, or for legalization of marijuana or against legalization of marijuana, or for gay marriage or against gay marriage, they will all say that they're acting upon what? The Constitution. And astaghfirullah for comparing these things to the Quran and Sunnah. I'm just trying to explain to you, right? All of them will say that we're acting upon the Constitution. We're acting upon the Federalist Papers. We're acting upon what the Founding Fathers wanted. But when it actually comes to a court case, what does the judge rule with? They say, okay, this is what Marbury versus Madison said, right? This is what, so-and-so said. This is what such and such case said, right? They rule based on case law and precedent, right? So this is what the fuqaha did as well, right? This is what the Quran and Sunnah says. Now how do I apply, when I'm living in Persia, how do I apply the Quran and Sunnah over here? And on this situation, okay, this is the answer. And because everybody is a legal mind at that time, the fuqaha, they'll just say, okay, this is the answer, everybody knows where we derived it from. And in different books, the proofs will be written as well, right? But for the masses, when a person comes and asks a question, I say, yeah, this is the answer, this is the answer. And these books of law, they're codified. Where did they come from? Quran and Sunnah. But what nowadays when you ask an alim, usually what is the proof? A lot of times you say, okay, oh yeah, it's in Hidayah. It's in, Raddul Muhtar. It's over here. Yeah, the rule is just written out over there. Why? Because it's hard work to go back to the source. Just like it's hard work to go back to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and start from 1776 and say, what did James Madison say about this? What did Thomas Jefferson say about this? What did John Adams say about this? Right? Who has time for that? We have our lives to live. Some people have time for it, right? But not everybody. So if you see like lawyers, people in the legal field, they love fiqh. I'm talking about like American lawyers, they appreciate fiqh because they understand what it is. They understand that it's based on Quran and Sunnah, right? Other people sometimes when a person says, so-and-so scholar said this, I'm like, no, I don't care about that. I care what the Quran and Sunnah says. Like, they're telling us what it says. Do you understand? That's just the point. Now going forward, so now I'm going to tell you the rules. We read the ayah, right? We read the ayah. Now let's go ahead with the rules. So this fiqh, all of it is derived from the ayat and derived from the hadith. When a person passes away, what is the first thing that's done with their wealth? Anyone? Funeral expenses. Even before that, the funeral expenses, okay? The funeral expenses, they need to be covered without extravagance. Now, if a person in the family decides that they want to go ahead and pay for it, more power to you, no problem. But technically, it must come out of the estate of the deceased, unless somebody else wants to pay it. Now, if they don't have the money, then it's the job of the Muslims to get together and take care of them, right? Now, the funeral, okay, whatever Rahman funeral home, costs, that's not extravagant. It's just whatever. So the process over here, when somebody passes away, what do? You call Brother Asim Khan, right? Brother Asim Khan, he'll call Rahman. He will give you the cost, everything. Then he'll call one of us. He'll say, lead the janaza, and the ghusl will be done. Okay, that's what you do. That's not extravagant. If a person says, I want an extra deluxe coffin with air conditioning, I want a silk kafan, this is extravagant, right? Number 2, after the funeral expenses are covered, the person's debts should be paid. If the debts are equal to or exceed the person's estate, no inheritance is distributed to the heirs, okay? Now, you might be thinking, well, I have a mortgage, so, and I don't have $300,000 in the bank, right? I don't have $300,000 in the bank, so nobody will get inheritance. I have to pay off the house. No, just split the house according to the inheritance of Islam. Split the debt as well. Okay? Third, if something remains after settling the debts, what's the third thing? Do you distribute inheritance? Wasuya. You go to the will. The will is executed in up to 1/3 of the deceased's remaining estate. Now, invalid wills, they'll be disregarded, either in their entirety. So if the clause in the will was something that was completely invalid, like giving to an automatic inheritor. Like let's say, I write in my will that my daughter should get all of my wealth, right? Or, even my daughter should get 1/3 of my wealth, right? I write it in my will. That's invalid because she's an automatic inheritor, okay? Or partially. Now, why partially? Because a person decides to bequeath more than 1/3. So for example, I write in my will, Faris Bey has been so nice to me over the years, and Shahid Bey has been so nice to me over the years, I want them to take 2/3 of my wealth, right? What's going to happen is that 2/3 will be disregarded, but they will split 1/3 of my wealth, okay? So partially the will be disregarded. And remember, the will, this, as long as it doesn't go to an automatic inheritor, it doesn't have to go to a person. It can go to a cause, it can go to an institution, it can go to a non-Muslim as well. Okay? So like if a person is, a convert, for example, and you want to leave something behind for the family members who aren't Muslim, you're allowed to give them this wasiya as well. Non-Muslims don't inherit, like they're not automatic inheritors. So like if a person becomes Muslim, their children, or non-Muslim children, will not inherit from them automatically, but you're allowed to leave a wasiya for them. Okay. Now before going forward, speaking about the will now, there's a hadith to ponder over. Few hadiths. Number 1, in Darul Qutni, there's a hadith that says, Al-idrar fil wasiyya min al-kaba'ir. Causing harm through the will is from the major sins. Number 1. Number 2, and this hadith is terrifying. It's in Abu Dawood. إن الرجل أو المرأة لا يعمل بطاعة الله 60 سنة A man or woman will obey Allah for 60 years. ثُمَّ يَحْضُرُهُمَ الْمَوْتِ Then death will come to them. فَيُضَارَّانِ فِي الْوَصِيَّةِ Then they harm people through their will. فَتَجِبُ لَهُمَ النَّارِ Then the fire becomes compulsory on them. Right? That's why I was saying that even on your way out, if you make sure to say that my wealth needs to be distributed in a manner that's in accordance with Allah's will, what this does is a testament to you as a person. It's saying I care so much that even when I die, when I'm not in this world, my property needs to be handled in accordance with Allah. And similarly, if a person is dying and say, do whatever you want, it's not my problem anymore. You guys gave me a headache for the last 60 years. Now, Khudafis, you guys deal with it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, a Muslim is thorough. And you see things all the way through the end and beyond the end as well. So now these are some terms, I guess, if you want to go through. Wasiya, it means literally any order in life or death, but the common usage, it's used to refer to a request to be fulfilled after death, a will or a bequest, okay? And now, look, sometimes wealth might not always come into it. There's other things that have to be considered in a wasiyah. Like let's say, for example, alhamdulillah, I did Hajj, and I hope that you guys have also done Hajj, because now it looks like very difficult. Right? But, let's say I didn't do Hajj. So I leave a wasiyah and I say to my son, you, Abdul Hamid, you need to go and you need to perform Hajj for me. And I leave the money for him, right? This Abdul Hamid needs to do Hajj for me. Not Khadija, not Abdul Rahim, not Abdul Rab. It's Abdul Hamid's job to go ahead and do it. Unless there's some extenuating circumstance that he's physically not able to, it's his job to do it. So wasiyah, if you ask somebody to do it, it's wajib for you to fulfill it if you're able to. Okay? So there's also something we should keep in mind. Another term is zawil furud. This is those relatives whose portion of inheritance has been specified by the Quran, Hadith, or the consensus of the Ummah. And these, they are not eligible to receive a wasiyah. There's 12 of them that are specified in the Quran. I'll say them. I see some people take notes. I'll say them slowly. I have some slides. If you're interested in the slides, I'll give it to you afterwards. No problem. Just ask me. I can email it to you. Now, there's nice graphs and stuff. I didn't put that on here. If you want graphs and stuff, inshallah, maybe we can make it and we can do it on a later day. Okay? Father, number one. Always interprets. This is in no real, particular order. Father. Number two, paternal grandfather, the dada. He's an automatic inheritor, but not always. If the father's not around, then he'll inherit. Okay? Maternal half-brother, maternal half-sister. Wife, husband, daughter, son's daughter, but not daughter's daughter. Okay? Full sister, paternal half-sister, mother, and grandmother with some conditions. These are the 12 automatic inheritors. And there's 6 specified portions in the Quran. There's 2 brackets. One of them is factors of 2, and the other one is factors of 3. So there's the factors of 2 bracket is 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8. And the other bracket is 1/3, 2/3, and 1/6. Okay? These are the 6. So these words, this is all you're going to see in the Quran. Nisf, rubu', sumun. Sulus, sulusan, sudus. These words come again and again. Okay? Another term to remember is asabat. Asabat is those inheritors whose portions are unspecified, but in the absence of the will furud, they take all of the wealth. Asaba means to conquer. It means to be strong, right? Like it's said about the Banu Umayyah, not the Banu Hashim. The Banu Umayyah, they had this quality of asaba. They were the dominant ones, right? And one of the miracles of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophethood was that momentarily, for a moment in time, the Banu Hashim, they went and they became dominant. And then when Muawiyah radiallahu anh came, history retook its course, and the Banu Umayyah, they got this asaba again, right? Zawil Arham, so the asaba, they take whatever is left over. Zawil Arham is those female relatives that are not from the will furud, or who are related to deceased through a female relative. They get special consideration as well in certain cases. Zawil Arham. And mahjub means somebody from Zawil Furud, but they don't receive inheritance because the presence of another relative that is higher on the hierarchy, or rather say nearer to the deceased. For example, from Zawil Furud we have the grandfather, the paternal grandfather. But if the father is alive, the paternal grandfather is not going to inherit. What? He is mahjub. Due to who? Due to the father being alive. Now we come to the overview of the wasiyah. Okay, when a person would pass away in the time of Jahiliyyah, all sorts of improprieties would be done with their wealth. They would leave close, needy relatives destitute, and instead they would give their wealth to wealthy, or they give their money to causes to gain fame, right? Much like today, like people, what do? They leave their money, like millions of dollars they'll leave to, some cause. I've seen, on the news, some people, they leave millions of dollars to a dog, right? Look it up, all sorts of strange things happen. It happens, right? And it hurts your relatives. So eventually, ayahs 180 to 182 were revealed of Surah Baqarah, which made it fard to leave a bequest, a wasiyah at the time of death for the parents and close relatives. Okay? For the parents and close relatives, it became fard. Initially, before the laws of inheritance were revealed, Allah made it fard for you to leave a will for your parents and your close relatives. Now this wasiyah would apply to 1/3 of the wealth. Okay? The remaining 2/3 would go to the children. So in that time, initially what people would do was children would inherit everything. Children or strong relatives. They would just take it. Otherwise, the usual practice is the children would get it if they were elder, right? And usually the daughters wouldn't get it. So Allah said, look, you're harming the parents, you're harming other close relatives that you have. It's fard for you that before you die, make a will giving, spreading your inheritance to other relatives. Okay? So now the wasiyah, it has 3 components. Number 1, to bequeath some amount of wealth to relatives who aren't pre-assigned portions of the inheritance. This part of the ayah is not fard anymore, but it's mustahab. And the wasiyah is still, it's mustahab and recommended to bequeath some amount of your money to relatives or loved ones who aren't automatically inheriting from you. Okay? Number 2, making wasiyah to other relatives is fard. This was the initial order. Ayahs 11 and 12 of Surah Nisa, which we're discussing today, they abrogated this order. I don't want to get too off topic, so we won't talk about abrogation in Islam. What we can do is you have 1 week, inshallah, research abrogation. We talked about it way back in Surah Baqarah, and we could do a recap of why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogate some orders and say that, okay, we're not following this anymore, we're following this. Lastly, the rule is the wasiyah could not exceed 1/3 of the deceased's wealth. And this also remains till today, right? Now a person is allowed to give less in wasiyah. I don't have to give 1/3 of my wealth to Faris Bhai and Shahid Bhai. I could give 1/4 too. I could just say that, you guys could take my car that nobody will want, 2011 Nissan Versa, right? Right? And a person, they have full discretion in how they want to distribute it as long as it doesn't go to a pre-assigned inheritor. Okay? If you owe somebody, it's wajib to leave a wasiyah to fulfill your right. There's one other thing that people can leave wasiyahs for, and this is also important. If a person has fasts that they haven't made up, if a person has prayers they haven't made up, if a person has hajj that they haven't done, you can leave wasiyah for it. For the fasts, fidyah has to be paid for each missed fast, right? Fidyah is roughly equal to the amount that we take for sadaqatul fitr, for each fast. If a person hasn't performed salah, fidyah for each salah, right? If a person hasn't done hajj, leave wasiyah and leave the money for hajj. Now you're 1/3, you don't get 1/3 after this. This is coming out of that 1/3 for wasiyah. But you're doing this to take care of the obligations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has on you. And since I mentioned fasting, right? I'll mention something, this is especially for our Hyderabadi brothers, something that we should do. At least I've noticed. In our Hyderabadi women, they're not good about making up their fasts, right? They don't make them up. They miss 5-6 fasts every year due to not being able to pray and fast. They miss those. Then they miss 4, 5, 6 Ramadans due to children and breastfeeding. and they'll be 50 years old and they never made any of those up, right? So we need to encourage our women, folk, our sisters, daughters, wives, make up your fasts, right? Like I think my mom, right before she went to Hajj, she made up like the fast she missed when she was pregnant with me, right? So that's the, like, we should encourage them. Otherwise, they have to give wasiyat for it at the end of their life, right? So, and give fidya. And what's the best way to make up the fast? Easiest way. You keep them with her, right? Keep them in the winter months. Once the time changes, Maghrib comes down to 5:30, right? And Fajr comes up to 6:30, right? Wake up in the morning, wake up 6 o'clock, have a nice big breakfast, drink coffee, drink chai, whatever. Skip your lunch and have a late lunch when you get home, and you can have it together. You will, like we made up, me and my wife, we made up like 40 fasts in one Ramadan. And then she got pregnant again and she missed the Ramadan. And now we're back to square one, right? But you'll get closer, and it's a great way of getting, of helping your wife fulfill her obligation. Okay? So now these are, and so now one other thing that you should remember about the wasiyah. Let's say somebody is an automatic inheritor, but they're mahjoob in this situation. Here is very common, okay? And may Allah protect all of your children. But if somebody has multiple children, right, and the children are adults, and one of their children predeceases them, and they leave behind grandchildren, right? Now the grandchildren, they won't inherit. Why? Because they're not near on the hierarchy to the parent. The children are closer. So like let's say that, Zayd left, right? So let's say Zayd, he had 3 sons and 1 daughter. Okay? Now, all of them have kids, but one of Zayd's sons passes away and he had a son. Okay? Now Zayd's 2 remaining sons and 1 daughter, they all inherit. The grandson of Zayd, bichara, he's not an automatic inheritor. Why? He's mahjoob because of his, his chachas and tayas and pupi. They've made him mahjoob. What can be done? Wasiyah is a great situation. It's a great solution. That you specify in your will, I want 1/3 of my estate to go to my grandchildren from, my child that passed away, right? Because they might usually inherit, but in this scenario, specific scenario, they're not inheriting due to the presence of other relatives who are alive. So they're allowed to get wasiyah, right? So like if a person, let's say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid, let's say that a person, they get divorced from their wife, right? And they've been married, husband and wife, they get divorced. Now, the wife, she passes away. Her ex-husband is not going to inherit from her. But there's still those feelings, they still, they separated cordially. She could leave wasiyah for him. She could leave up to 1/3. Now, usually it doesn't work out like that, but it's a possibility, right? All I'm saying is that automatic inheritors, right? If a situation exists when where they are no longer automatically inheriting, you can give them wasiyah. Okay? Now what we'll do now, I think, because we've gone for like 35 minutes, and this is going to be like a longer discussion, so we're not even going to get into how much the parents and children discuss. We'll go over that next week, inshallah, if Allah gives tawfiq. We've talked about wills today, right? Now, there's a brother here, he asked me one time, and so I'll just mention some questions that get asked about wills. If you have something, go ahead and ask them as well. If I can't answer them, I'm not going to make up something. I'll just say I don't know, and we'll get back later on, inshallah. So he said, for example, let's say you have several siblings, right? Now the parents have passed away. Parents have passed away. Now you have a bunch of brothers, and one person, they have all daughters, right? In a situation where somebody has all daughters, they have no son, what's going to happen? And they don't have parents. The daughters will get 2/3. The wife will get 1/8. The rest of it goes to whom? Brothers, like in Sa'ad bin Rabi radiyallahu anhu. So, the question is, what if the siblings, they come to an agreement and they say that, look, don't worry about me. After I pass away, we're all set in our lives. Each of us should look after our own children. Is that valid or not in Islam? Right? There's 2 ways that this can be done. One is if it's just a verbal agreement, what's going to happen is when, Zayd again passes away. Zayd has 4 daughters now, right? So Zayd's 4 daughters, they'll get 2/3. 1/8 will go to his wife. Whatever's remaining will go to his brothers that are alive. And if he has sisters, it's going to be split amongst all of them. If it was just a verbal agreement, automatically the siblings are going to inherit, whether they say we want it or not. Now they're free to gift it back to Zayd's daughter, Zayd's wife. That's option 1. Option 2 is that Zayd leaves a wasiyah. In the wasiyah, he says, all of my wealth should go to my daughters and my wife, and it should be distributed evenly. Now, this isn't permissible, right? But there's one exception, and it's in a hadith. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, La wasiyata li warisa, that there's no wasiyah to an automatic inheritor except if the other inheritors, if they give permission. So if the brothers and sister of Zayd, if they say, no, it's okay, we're cool with your wife and your children taking all of your wealth, fine, right? They're allowed to have it. But first the daughters are going to get 2/3. And then the wife will get 1/8. The remainder will be split between them. But there's one condition here. Zayd's brothers, they have to affirm this after Zayd passes away as well. Why? Because the Sharia is very fair. It could be that a person, they feel pressure in the person's lifetime to agree to something. Or if all of the other siblings are agreeing, say, oh, okay, I'm going to look confused, or I'm going to look messed up. I can't say anything. After they pass away, if they affirm it, they can't take it back then. But it has to be affirmed after Zayd passes away. And I'll give you an example of this. Not exact. There's a word in Arabic called misal. Misal means like a full, complete example. Then there's a nazir. Nazir means like similar. It shares some qualities. This is a nazir. Umar radiallahu anh, when he was near death, he told Abdullah, his son, go to Aisha and ask her, please I would request that I be buried next to my 2 companions, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Aisha radiallahu anha said, I always thought I would be buried next to my husband and father, but I feel that Umar is more deserving. Abdullah, he went back to Umar radiallahu anhu, and he said that she said yes. Umar radiallahu anhu said, Alhamdulillah, I could die in peace now, but go and ask her after I pass away as well. She may be intimidated while I'm still alive. Therefore she said yes. When I pass away, go and make sure with her again, and if she says yes, bury me there. And she said yes. Okay? This is just an example. That's one. Another example is, there's a brother, he asked me last week, he's not here this week. He said that 2 of his siblings, I'm kind of the same, 2 of his children, they're very well off. And 2 of the children, they're okay, they're not well off. They said, Baba, we don't want our inheritance, we want our other siblings to get it, we'll give it to you. So he wrote out and he made a trust stating this, right? He said, is it valid Islamically? I said, again, now if the trust is basically a will, right? Now if you pass away, they have to affirm after you die. And if they change their mind, they can't be considered sinful or they can't be considered bad. Because inheritance, it has an emotional component to it as well. Sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's just about some connection to the person, some sentimental value, right? Third question that is commonly asked about wasiyah. I have a child who's very bad, right? I have a child who's bad, and I know that if he gets the inheritance, he will use it in a bad way. He'll waste his money. Or this child has always been bad to me. I disown him. He is not inheriting from me. Is this allowed in Islam? No, it's not allowed in Islam. The second a person passes away, if they're your child, they will automatically inherit. However, there's a solution to this. Solution to this is that in your lifetime, if not out of a personal vendetta, but if you feel that this child is going to use this wealth in a way that is, going to harm their dunya and their akhirah, and the dunya and akhirah of others, you're allowed to distribute great portions of your wealth to others in your lifetime, your children, other causes. But whatever little you keep for yourself, when you pass away, this bad child, feels bad to say a bad child, but they'll still inherit their portion as well. It'll just be lessened, right? Similarly, if you have a child who's gone above and beyond for you, right? Let's say, for example, in your old age, they stay with you, they live with you, and they take care of you, or they help out with the family business. In your lifetime, you're allowed to give them something extra, right? But you can't say that after I die, it goes to them. Okay? This is something that's important. Now, another question that comes up a lot of times is, yeah.
Sorry, that was related to that point, but is there like a point where like maybe you can see that you're about to die, and then you say that I want to give all my money to this person?
Very good question. And the books of fiqh, they cover this as well. It's called maradul maut. When a person has entered a potentially terminal illness. Potentially terminal, what we mean is that the doctors say, okay, this person is not going to, that this illness has a very high likelihood of being the cause of death of the person, right? At that time, you can't start giving away your wealth at that point. Now whatever you have, it's locked in, okay? Because why? At that time, in some aspects, your inheritors, they have a right over your wealth, right? Now, if you recover, then whatever, you're allowed to do whatever you want again. And in that time, in that potentially terminal illness, you can't give wasiyat either, right? That needs to be done beforehand. And that's why it's important to take care of these things now. Now, I think some senior members of the community, maybe Brother Muqim, Dr. Nasir, others, they might know lawyers, good Muslim lawyers, right? Perhaps, and I know Irfan Shutari, he's a lawyer as well, right? They could put you in touch with people who do trusts. The best way to get a will done in America is through a trust. You never want to go to probate court. Probate court will take years, it'll take a lot of expenses, and it's just going to lead to conflict. Trust is the best way to go, right? But you take care of your wasiyat now. When a person is in that potentially terminal illness, you can't leave wasiyat at that time either. Now, if you give a wasiyah and then you recover, now that wasiyah is active. Why? Because it showed this wasn't, your inheritors really didn't have a right to that wealth at that time. Okay? And any wasiyah that you give before you die, as long as it's not when you're like in that potentially terminal ill state, maradul maut, maradul wafat, at that time you're allowed to renege. You could change your mind. You could say like, I want you to, give all of my, I want to give 1/3 of my wealth to, I don't know, to Helping Hand. Maybe I shouldn't name any organization, to some cause. And then, now the situation with the Muslims in India has changed. So there's some other organization that I want to support over there. I'll give over there. You're allowed to change it before you pass away. No problem.
Sorry.
Good. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Specific case, but like, for example, if it's like a very long terminal illness, it's probably like you go case by case for that.
It's case by case. You ask doctors, and some of it has to do with like general understanding of people, right? If people understand that this thing, like the person is really on their way out. Like a person has stage 1 cancer, you're not really going to consider that to be death, and Allah protect us all from that, right? But if a person has stage 4 cancer and the doctor says like, yeah, these are really, we might do 1 round of chemo, and if it doesn't go well, there's really nothing that we could do, like that's going to be considered. So it does go on a case by case basis, and there's some room for kind of like a judgment call, okay? Some of it you have to be like honest with yourself, right? And realistic. Okay, I was saying there was one more. Yes, some people ask, are we allowed to distribute our inheritance in our lifetime? This is another question. Now, there's 2 things. If a person waits until their death to distribute their wealth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already assigned who's going to get what, and it transfers into their possession according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? According to the shares that we read in this ayah. But if a person wants to distribute their assets in their lifetime, particularly when it comes to children, in that case you don't go 2-to-1 with children. You distribute it equally when it comes to your children. Why? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are a hadith in which he is warned that treating one child, giving one child something that you don't give another child, this is zulm, this is oppression, right? On the basis of just like, I like you better, right? Not, again, if a child has done much more for their parents, that's something different, right? But just on the basis of, I like you better, that's not allowed. My teacher, one time he told me one thing. He said, look, you'll have, this before I had children, you'll have students, some of them your heart might just incline to one student more than another, you like them more. He said, but you have to treat everyone fair. And he said, watch, it'll happen with your children as well. And parents here, you be your own judge. If you have, maybe your heart is more inclined to one child than another child. It could be. But that doesn't give any right to treat one differently than the other, right? So if you distribute your wealth in your lifetime, or a vast majority of your wealth in your lifetime, if you say, I want to distribute my inheritance in my lifetime, then you distribute equally. You give your spouse, you're not limited to 1/4 anymore. You give your spouse what you think they'll need to take care of in their life, right? And then you give each of your children equally. The last thing that I'll say, it's not really related to this, but it's something that is a great cause of confusion at the time of death. Islam, it places utmost importance on property rights. And things should be communicated, though it may seem awkward, right? A lot of times there are understandings, but these understandings, they end up leading to that they're not on paper, or they haven't been verbalized. It leads to conflict after a person passes away, right? It's like a cute thing that speakers, they like to say, what's mine is hers and what's hers is hers. That's not true, right? What's yours is yours, what's hers is hers. She has some extra rights to your wealth, yes, that you have to provide X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, your money is your money. Her money is her money, right? The things that you own, whose car is it? Is it your car? Is it her car? Or do you genuinely, is it 50-50? It doesn't have to be that you paid 50%, she paid 50%. It could be that I paid 100%, but out of the happiness of my heart, I say that she's half owner of this, right? Usually with houses, that's the understanding. If the wife is not working, for example, in America, I would say that the urf, I think if you read different fatwas from India, Pakistan, it's a different world out there. But I would say over here, I think the understanding is, if a man is working and a wife isn't working, and he purchases the house, not just his house, it's also her house. She has 50% share to it, right? But it's good to just go ahead and just verbalize these things. Just say, you own this, you own this. So that when you pass away, there's no difficulty. The author of Ma'arif al-Quran, Mufti Muhammad Shafi, when he was near his death, he had a few things in his room, and he would be very particular about what came in and what came out. So then his son, Mufti Taqi Usman, he said, Baba, why are you so particular? He said, look, I've already told your mother each and everything that belongs to me. This glass belongs to me, right? These sheets, these are mine. This clothing is mine. I don't want you bringing other things in here that belongs to your mother or that belongs to you all, and you may think that it's part of the inheritance, and then go ahead and you may distribute that. Or I don't want things coming out. This is more of an extreme example. I'm just saying how people are so careful about it, right? And I don't want things to be taken out of this room and just kind of put here and there in the house, and each of you actually has a right in it, but your mother keeps it, or so and so sibling keeps it, or it's just given away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand this responsibility that we have about taking care of our inheritance. I hope that this...
Last question.
Sure.
In this, let's say somebody has multiple kids, and a couple of them are older, educated, or married off, and these other ones are younger, still needs to be taken. So can somebody make a Vasuya like that, where saying, hey, when I die, if some of my kids are younger, haven't gone through college, haven't gone through their marriage, they will get an extra 100,000, 200,000, whatever, X amount of money, so that they can study, and then the rest of it will be distributed per.
That's interesting. So what would have to happen, because it's a Wasiya to an inheritor, right? You could leave that Wasiya. But then your inheritors, what they're gonna have to say is after you pass away, they're gonna have to affirm it, right? Another way of doing this perhaps is you set up like a trust so that it's already transferred to them in your lifetime. But then like the challenge there is that, you know, if they pass away, that I mean, if a person lives longer, and like these children, they get older, now you're like, well, they don't need this extra amount of money, but it's already been transferred to them. But I mean, the best way to do that is you kind of have a sit down with the siblings, say, this is what I want, and they can just affirm it after they pass away. That's one thing. Another way that you could do is kind of like a workaround, and you know, it shouldn't be done with the goal of circumventing the Sharia or anything like that. But you know, you could probably, like, you could say to somebody, I would like my wealth to be spent in this way, and they have the right to do it or not. They're not really obligated to. So like, you know, we had a situation. They didn't end up doing this. We had like a situation where my khalu passed away. So it's the exact same situation. Two children are settled in their life, and one of them is, you know, much younger. So then, and I was like, what you can do is give like the 1/3, have a wasiya, give it to the son-in-law, right? And the son-in-law, like, he's very close with the family and everything. I say that, you know, it's yours, but I would love if you used it for the education of my son, right? Of my son. So you could do that, or you could just put it in a trust, or you could, you know, something like that. But yeah, that one is a challenging situation. Yeah, to say that, you know, they get an extra amount, because see that now, if you put the money like kind of like in their name in your lifetime, if you say, okay, I've given it to you, now it's actually theirs. So now if they get older, and you can't say, oh, never mind, I'm going to take this back. And that's where the challenge comes. But see, part of this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, آباؤهم وأبناؤهم لا تدرون, that's the end of the ayah, لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. You really don't know which will be more beneficial to you in the end. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's settled things. And then Allah ends this ayah by saying, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. Allah is all-knowing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wise. Sometimes we think like, how is it that, you know, I'm not able to take care of one of my child where I paid for the school of this other child? What do I do, right? So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying like, I'm wise. But then certain things that you can do, like prepay, like you could buy education credits and this and that. We'll talk about these things. I think it's all. Jazakallah khairah for everyone's time. I hope that we made a topic that may be dry. I hope that it was engaging enough. Assalamu alaikum.